how do you approach a classic movie from 1968, I think it was?
Yeah.
Without mistreating it, but still creating something new and own.
Well, that's what I have to say. The thing that I am proudest about and most excited about with the new series, you know, this most current that War is a part of, is that they're actually different from the originals, but they are connected along a trajectory and they vibrate in the same universe. So what I mean is that the central question of the '68 movie is a narrative question of what. And at the end, you get a shocking moment where you realize, oh, the reason this planet is like this is the what is, we are on our planet. And this is about how we destroyed ourselves. And 5,000 years of evolution has allowed these other creatures to take over the planet. But that removes the burden of the what for us. We know what it becomes. The end of our story is it becomes Planet of the Apes. And so that means that this series, by re-entering it, and in a different way with what Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver did in their script, it doesn't use evolution, it used the viral technology. That now sets us along a journey that's no longer about what, but how. And when you do something that's about how, it becomes about an exploration of character and psychology and philosophy and politics, so that it's a very intimate journey, and we become the apes, and that's all very different from the original. This story, the cool thing in doing this story, when Mark Baumbach and I sat down to write it, is it was a story that had not been told in the ape story. It's this kind of epic sort of war for Caesar's soul, was a story that's very different from the '68 movie, but never forgets the '68 movie.
Okay, thank you. When you look back at Dawn, is there any technological development in the last 3 years that allowed you to make things that were impossible 3 years ago?
Well, I mean, the technology got better in terms of the rendering of the apes. So that part of it meant that the apes were going to look more real, which when I finished Dawn, I talked to the artists at Weta, and they said, oh, we've just redone our pipeline, but it'll just make it easier. And I was like, they're not going to look better because they look amazing. How could they look better? And then when the shots started coming in, they did look remarkably better. But the thing that we did on the production side was, on the last movie, here's what people don't understand. Every shot that we do on the set. And the actors are in all of those shots. So Andy Serkis is playing his character, and I'm shooting whatever the shot that I want to do is, and then he has to get out of the shot. And I have to get that shot again. So that limits the kinds of shots. Like on Dawn, there were certain kinds of shots I couldn't do because they were too complex for the operator to be able to do, because they're not following an actor. Nobody's there. We got a piece of equipment which was a kind of motion control called a techno dolly, where I could do very complex shots. And then after we had followed our actors, they could step out, and then I could press a button and we could play them back. So suddenly I was able to do things cinematically that on the last movie I couldn't. So that was definitely a leap forward, just for me as a director, to be able to do more shots in the style of what I would have wanted to be able to do.
Is it more important nowadays as a director to have like a bigger imagination, because you always have to keep the big picture in mind, and you have to keep in mind what it's going to look like on screen. But with all the green screens, and I mean people walking around with motion capturing suits, did it become harder to imagine?
For me, it's harder because one of the things that the director's job is to be the audience. You sit there and you respond emotionally, and you're also supposed to be the emotional compass of the movie. You're trying to follow the story, you're trying to see what an audience will perceive, you're trying to evaluate performance and then adjust the performances so that everybody's doing, you're kind of a conductor of sorts. The problem is, if you imagine if you had an orchestra and you didn't actually have the violins playing, you have to focus on what is there and block out the fact that what isn't there is not there yet. And it's a very strange process, which is actually easier in the shooting, because there you're dealing with, Andy's on the set. I'm looking at him. He's just there performing. And when he's doing a scene with Woody Harrelson, the two of them are together. So that enables me to actually do something that feels traditionally a lot like maybe even an independent drama. It's just we use a tremendous amount of effects afterwards. It's the part afterwards as we're trying to cut the movie together and see if we think that it's engaging emotionally and if you're telling the story, but so much of it isn't there until the very end. I haven't seen exactly how the movie looks until about 10 days ago when the last VFX finally goes in. And we are in a long process of working with Weta for over a year on each of these shots. And they're evolving, and I'm trying to draw out the emotions that I saw on the actors' faces to get them to appear on the apes' faces. And it is, for me, very challenging because I do respond to what I see, and I have to train my head to see what's there, but not see what isn't there, and imagine that it's all just going, so that an audience will have an experience because we've been able to make sense of that. So it's a new skill that especially for me.
All right, thank you. We meet this new character, the Bad Ape.
Yeah.
Was it important for you to create a little bit of a comic relief to don't make the movie too dark, because it is a really dark movie?
This movie does go to darker places, I think, than any of the other. It's the darkest of the three in terms of where Caesar goes, and I think that, look, the genesis of Bad Ape was that we wanted to imply that the world was a new world and different from what the apes had assumed. They thought they were the only intelligent apes on the planet, and he was a seed that implied that there are apes all across the planet, and that he's such a lonely character that, to me, he was heartbreaking. He is heartbreaking, but that through that heartbreak comes a kind of humor that we've not had in any of the films. So it did seem like an opportunity, and the counterbalance, I think, is important, because the story becomes quite challenging in places, and to know that he and that group of Caesar's faithful partners are out there trying to work to do the right thing, it does create this spirit. The one thing about the apes is, at the end of the day, they're like a family. And the thing that I think we get from them is the sense of connectedness and love. They actually do care about each other very deeply, even as we go through how some of them turn against each other and how they even at a certain point turn against Caesar. In the end, there's something fundamental that connects them, and I think we root for them. And so this Bad Ape character is part of that. He becomes a part of a family.
Okay. Is there time for one more? Okay, thank you. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen in Rise, I've seen James Franco's character raising Caesar.
Yeah.
I've seen Jason Clarke's character in Caesar meeting on an equal level in Dawn, and now I saw Caesar taking care of Nova.
Yes.
It's like,
and also his son Cornelius. Yeah.
Yeah, and was like an evolution for me. So what to expect in the next movie, if there's gonna be one?
Well, I think that, if you imagine the emotional stakes of all these stories, part of that has to do with our relationship to each other as families, And so, to me, from the beginning, the idea of protecting the young and the innocent and trying to find a way to navigate through a very dangerous world has been one of the parts of the story. So there's no way that won't in some way continue. Like Bad Ape, as we were saying, he becomes a member of a family, so that family doesn't have to be a conventional family. It just has the form of the family, and Nova is definitely a part of that. And the other thing that Nova represents is that she is a flicker of empathy that is sort of always over Caesar's shoulder at a time when he doesn't want any. He's on a revenge mission, and yet he can't change something that's fundamental in him. That's such a key part of who he is, that there she is following him, and he does not want her around, and yet he is drawn to her and is affected by her.
Well, and there is also the final scene with Woody Harrelson as well.
Yes.
Where this little empathy comes through, but
for sure, that's what the whole movie's about. We've deliberately made you go on a journey where you want revenge as the audience, and then when you get to where you're going, the idea is to look at that and to question whether or not that idea really makes sense.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I fight only to protect apes.
Das war unser Interview mit Matt Reeves, dem Regisseur von Planet der Affen Survival. Wir haben aber natürlich auch den Film gesehen und eine Review dazu gemacht und auch ein Interview mit Andy Serkis führen können, nämlich dem Hauptdarsteller, der Caesar spielt. Das seht ihr alles da. Da unten könnt ihr abonnieren, liken, teilen, weitererzählen, machen.